Williams first came, he told me he was from Mississippi. But when he said goose liver and crackers, I said, I know he's from Mississippi, amen. And Brother Mason, the only one who said amen, and knew what he was talking about. Amen. God bless. You know, the Bible says that we weep with those who weep, and we rejoice with those who rejoice. Amen. And certainly as we're in the fellowship of believers, that gives us a wonderful privilege to rejoice. Amen. We certainly weep, first of all, with a number of members of our church family who are grieving. Sister Peterson, our minister of music, we certainly keep her and the King family, Reverend Gary Wilson in prayer, Reverend Caledon, as he mentioned, amen. So many are grieving, and we certainly want to keep everyone certainly in prayer. But we also want to rejoice with those who rejoice, amen. I was given this, on your birthday, take time to enjoy the good things in life. Take time to remember the special moments. Take time to celebrate the various happiest of birthdays. Sister Maxine Vaden turns 95 years old. Amen. Let's stand up and say her happy birthday right now. Amen. Then Job stood up and tore his robe, shaved his head, fell to the ground and worshiped, saying, naked came I from my mother's womb, and naked will I leave this life. Amen. The Lord gives, and the Lord takes away. Amen. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Throughout all this, Job did not sin or blame God for anything. I want to place emphasis, we often place emphasis on verse 21. I want to place emphasis on the latter part of verse 20, which says, he fell to the ground and worshiped. Amen. I want to talk about loving God when it hurts. Amen. Talk about loving God when it hurts. And the premise is this: are you able to worship God in the hard times? Are you able, are you willing to worship God in the hard times? Can you worship God when it's dark in your life? When the lights are not coming on, when no prayers are being answered, when things seem to be going from bad to worse and never getting any better. Amen. Can you worship God in the hard times? Can you worship God in the dark? There's someone even here today who, from an emotional and from a physical standpoint, you really didn't want to be here this morning. Because clouds are not only outside, but clouds are hovering in your life. dealing with financial troubles, dealing with sickness. It's not only gloomy outside, but it's gloomy in your life. But yet, before church started, you heard the holiest of holies say, "I was glad when they said unto me." I can't find a reason to be glad. I can't find a reason to be happy around me. But somebody said, if I can simply get into the presence of the Lord. You do know the Bible says that the joy of the Lord is your strength. And in the presence of the Lord, there's fullness of joy. So even while it's dark and gloomy in your life, you found a way to get dressed. You found a way to get in your car. You found a way to drive in the rain to come into the house of the Lord. You don't know if it's going to get better or worse. But you found a way to worship God in hard times. Listen, as we open our Bibles and we all find ourselves meeting this great patriarch of the church in the Bible in the land of Uz, quickest route to the land of Uz is the book of Job. Listen, what we learn about Job is that Job's estate was extensive. Job's estate was valuable, but it was also removable. And so I wonder, because all of us go through the same thing that Job went through. Now, it may be on various levels, but listen, God, as the men sang, God is constantly blessing us. Now, it may not be as extensive or valuable as Job, but whatever you have, it came from God. James says every good and every perfect gift comes where? Not from the bank, not from your job, it comes from above. So whatever you have, God gave it to you. But I want you to know it's extensive, it's valuable, but even what we have is removable. And so what we have placed our trust in, when it's taken away, when our health is gone, when our finances are not there, when family is gone and friends are few, when we lose a job, can you worship God in the hard times? We don't have to repeat the story of Job. We know Job not only lost his children, he not only had his health affected, he not only lost his cattle. Job was in a very difficult situation. Job began, like many of us, to ask that question to God, why? It is all right to ask God questions. He said, God, why are you preserving my life when my soul is so bitter? Listen, we need to understand, just like Job was so depressed, he began to wrestle with suicidal thoughts when it got dark and gloomy in his life. But the only thing that kept Job from taking his life is that the darker it get, the more he worshiped God. And somebody need to understand that, listen, when it's darkest in your life, that's when you need to come and worship God the most. Job said, God, why are you keeping me when peace and prosperity are hidden from me? Job, my friends, was telling God, God, don't talk to me in my disaster. Get me out. And many of us struggle with God and his mysteriousness. Because we'll find ourselves in a very difficult situation, having a conversation with God. And at some point in the conversation, we're like, God, I know you hear me and I hear you. But I don't want you to talk to me right now. I want you to get me out. But God has a way of talking to us in the midst of our stuff and reminding us that he's a very present help even when it's dark outside. Listen, you wouldn't really know how bright his glory is if you didn't see his glory in the darkness. Listen, the perennial or ultimate question raised by the book of Job is not really the simple question that we often ask. The simple question, wow, that simple question about why the righteous suffer, that is in the book of Job, but that's a very surface dealing with the struggles of Job. It's not simply about why the righteous suffer, but the question is, do men and women serve God disinterestedly? When you look at the first chapter of Job, the contention between God and Satan was this. It had nothing to do with good or bad people suffering. It had to do with his motive for worshiping God. God said, Job worships me. Matter of fact, when his children go out to kick it and party, they have banquets, they drink wine, they have a good time. Job covers them to make sure. Matter of fact, Job worships while his children are out doing everything that's not pleasing to God. Job was a worshiping man. God said to Satan, Job was a good man. Job worships me. And Satan said, you know what? I think he only comes to church because of what you give him. I think he serves you because he has an ulterior motive. If you make it dark in his life, I guarantee you he won't be singing in the choir. If you make it dark in his life, he won't be standing at the door ushering. If you make it dark in his life, take his money, he'll stop tithing. Job only serves you because he has an interest and an investment in serving you. But if you take away, remove it, guarantee you Job won't worship. Here's the good news in the text. God took it away. And the Bible says, Job worshiped and said, the Lord gave, the Lord takes away. Blessed be the name of the Lord. Somebody in your darkness need to be able to say, bless the Lord, oh my soul, and all that is within me. Bless in the darkness. Bless while it's gloomy. Bless while I'm sick. Bless God's holy name. Amen. So the question for you, do you love God without expecting something from God? This text, my brothers and sisters, makes us struggle theologically with the sovereignty and the goodness of God. Because what we find in the text is that God, by permission, allows divine target practice to take place on Job. Amen. He puts a target on Job's chest and his back. Amen. And says, go get him. All right. Now understand that God tests us in order to get glory through our faithfulness. The enemy tempts us, trying to get us not to give glory to God. So understand, God gets more glory in our story when we praise God in the dark than when we praise God when the sun is shining. So somebody right now, I know it might be dark, but you ought not be ashamed to praise God in the darkness so that God can get all the glory. And your glory of praising God in the dark will bless somebody else. Listen, one writer has said, there are 3 votes in everyone's life. And I know everybody, all of us are getting ready for 2020. Everybody's excited about voting. The fact of the matter is, one writer says there are only 3 votes in life that matter. God's vote that is always for us. Satan's vote that is always against us. And our vote that can go either way. God's vote is always for us. Satan's vote is always against us. What you gonna do when it's dark in your life? When it was dark in Job's life, Job, guess what? Job went into that worship ballot box. And like Habakkuk, he said, though the fig tree may not blossom, though there be no herd in the stalls, I cast my vote with God. your life, where do you cast your vote? I see three observations. Number one, understand, my friends, and Job teaches us, that worship is about a being and not a feeling. Worship is about a being and not a feeling. And that being is God. Worship is about God and not how you feel. All right. Because the fact of the matter is, you'll find there'll be sometimes you don't even feel good about God. But you still are required to worship. Even when you don't like the fact that God is not answering your prayers, you don't like the lot in life that God has given you, you don't like the fact that God has allowed your family to be tested, that God has allowed you to lose your job. You may not feel good about God, but you still have a requirement to worship God. Worship is about being. It's not about a feeling. But then also understand that worship is about trusting God, not knowing about every detail of his plans. Many of us, when we come to worship because we want God to somehow give us some supernatural insight into our situation, to help us to see how we're going to navigate this journey of Monday through Saturday. And then we come to worship, and God does not give us the intricate details of his plan. He simply says, come praise me in the good times and the bad. Trust me and walk with me day by day. Just trust my plan when you cannot trace my hand. Worship is about trusting God, not about knowing every detail of his plan. But also worship is an act of faith and not always about comfortable solutions. The fact is, many of us, when we come to worship, we expect God to give us comfortable and convenient solutions to our suffering. The fact of the matter is, we become disillusioned and discouraged with God because God does not always give us easy answers. You and I need to understand that God does not always give us easy answers because our faith would never grow. If God always gave us easy answers. Matter of fact, I can remember, listen, when I was coming along in school, I was very good in certain courses, but I didn't like science, I didn't like math. But they were required courses. So I'd always find somebody that could help me with the answers. But the fact of the matter is, somebody helping me with the answers on homework did me absolutely no good on the test when I didn't have anybody to help me. And the fact of the matter is, one day your test is going to come. And if God gave you all the easy answers, without helping you to grow stronger in the process, you would never make it, my brothers and sisters. Listen, a little girl heard some folk discussing the blessings of God. That little girl heard folk discussing the blessings of God. This little girl gave a wonderful illustration, much like Jesus did when he was 12 and confounded those who thought they were wise in the temple. Well, the little girl said, I think the blessings of God are like this. When I get on the elevator, I get into a little room and upstairs comes down. All right. Somebody will get that. Little girl said, I get into a little room and upstairs comes down. Somebody need to find a little room to get along with God. And when you get in that little room with God, somebody say when praises go up, blessings come down. And so we need to understand that God is still in the blessing business. Listen, brothers and sisters, we need to understand not just Job, but we find even the Apostle John, when he was stranded on the island of Patmos, found himself in a very dark place. Found himself in the spirit on the Lord's day, but it was very dark because he was in exile. But what we notice from Job and from John, my brothers and sisters, are some wonderful notes when it comes to worship. We need to understand that when it comes to worshiping God in the dark, you've got to accept the divine will of God. And understand when it comes to accepting the divine will of God, it means we've got to trust in the sovereign plan of God for our life. Understand that God will at times lead us through dark areas and seasons of our life. But when God leads us through these areas, the first step to deliverance is to accept the divine will of God. It doesn't mean that we are happy where we are. It doesn't mean that we want God to leave us where we are. And guess what? God is not going to leave you where you are. But you've got to accept the divine will of God and say, God, what is it you want me to learn in this season of my life? Because I know as soon as I learn it, you're going to get me out. God, What are you trying to strengthen in my life that is weak? What are you trying to take away from me? Accept the divine will of God. And that second note of worshiping God in the dark is commitment to the purpose of God. Now notice something. Many of us would accept the divine will of God in the context of worship because we want God to get us out of something. But then as soon as God gets us out, we don't complete the second note of worship, which is commitment to the purposes of God. We won't follow where he says go. We won't do what he says do. Now, on that first note of worship, when we accepted the divine will of God, we said, God, if you get me out of this, if you restore my health, if you give me another job, if you salvage my relationship, matter of fact, Lord, I'm going to come down and I'm going to rededicate my life to the Lord. And as soon as the Lord gets us out, we rededicate our life to the Lord. And then guess what? We don't see you in the worship service no more till you get in trouble again. Somebody going to break free, say amen, say out, say something. The fact of the matter is, the second note of worship is follow God where he says go and do what God says do. Third note of worship, you ought to have a sense of joy within the fellowship of God. Listen, I don't understand it, how it is. Matter of fact, many of us as believers, we are guilty of false advertising when it comes to God. Because when you read worship in the book of Revelation, it's a very happy place. Matter of fact, there's so much noise going on. It's a lot of noise going on in heavenly worship. And if we are supposed to be practicing down here, what's going to take place up there? We all guilty of false advertising. Now listen, when you was at the party last night, you wasn't looking like you looking right now. How come you can't be as happy for the Lord? Listen, y'all, the college football season is coming up. And I'm going to be shouting on Saturday. But I'm not going to let the Lord get me for shouting more on Saturday than I do on Sunday. Somebody knows the Lord is good and worthy of all of our praise. But then, the fourth note of worship is that we ought to rejoice. Because there's a cross and there's a resurrection. Job was able to rejoice because he knew something prophetically that we know by looking back. Before Christ even died on the cross, Job said, if a man die, shall he live again? Job said, those skin worms destroy this body, yet in my flesh, Job said, I'll see God. Job knew that one day there would be a Messiah. One day there would be a deliverer. One day he would die. One day he would get up and Job would be vindicated. Listen, my brothers and my sisters, it was dark on that Friday, but the light was shining on the cross. It was dark in that grave, but when his body was placed in that grave wasn't dark no more. It was dark on that Sunday morning, but when the sun got up, the sun started shining. Somebody needs to know that God will bring sunshine in your life, but you gotta worship God even in the darkness. My brother, my sister, will you and can you worship God even in the darkness? Let the church say amen. I don't hear you. Hear you a little better. Ain't God good? The Lord said, make a joyful noise unto the Lord and say amen. He didn't say no, amen. He said amen. And some of us come to church today, we're too proud to say amen. We should be a witness for the Lord. Like we heard our pastor today preach the word of God. We should be shout because we heard how God has survived in Job. And he'll do the same thing for us. I've been in a funeral this week. My niece buried her on Wednesday, and it was a funeral. A lot of people's young lady had a massive heart attack, and she is gone. That's why the Lord said, be ye ready. You know it's not the time that death gonna knock at our door. Young or old, sooner or later it's gonna come. You find the day that people's wait say, I got time. I'm gonna wait for a little while before I come to church. You don't have no time. Because your time is not set when you want it to be set. It's only set when God wanted to be set. Is he all right? Yeah, he said, be ready because I'm coming. But you don't know the time. Young or old, if you haven't got your life in order with God, if it ever was a time that we need to recognize that God is in control, and he do the things on time. We all got a time set. I'm 85 years old. He done lied me a lot of times. But how many more have lied that many times? My niece only lied 62 years. But I went behind her quite a few years. Because God blesses. Allow these things to happen. If we will only just give it all to the Lord and let him have our problem can be solved to prayer. Prayer changes things in our life. Many people don't even pray, don't even know how to pray. But he gives us service in the Bible. Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. An easy prayer that we can ask anything in God's name. We should pray for soul salvation today, church. The door of the church is open. Will you stand? Be anyone out there that don't know the Lord and the parts of their sin, it's time to change your life and come to Christ right now. It's time to realize that ain't nobody can do you like this God. It's time to realize that you have somebody that watches over you all night long. Bright and early this morning, he sent his angel by your bedside and wake you up to another day that's been coming in his creation. And you should give God the praise today. If anyone here today, if I was you, if you need to come to Christ now, don't put today off for tomorrow. Because tomorrow is not promised to you. Is that all right? No, but you can do that now. For the Lord. God is good. God is good because he's good all the time. He gave you life. He put food on your table, put clothes on your bed, on your back, and shelter over your head. And you still won't give him the praise. Will it be one? Will it be one?